Have you ever wanted to light one of your own model kits? That's what we're doing with this robot. First, I'm going to open up his chest, and then I'm going to open up his eyes. This way we could get some lighting in there. I'm not sure if I'm going to light the top of his head with these two indentations, so you're going to have to stick around for the rest of the video to find out. So here we go. Let's get lighting this robot for the Green Lantern diorama. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on his chest. I'm going to use this Dremel bit, a very tiny one, kind of like a saw. I'm going to pop a hole, and then I'm going to run it around and pop that out. I'm going to get as close to the edge as possible. I just use a starter hole. I pop the drill bit through, and then I kind of use the drill bit as a saw, chopping around the plastic. The plastic is very soft, and I'm getting really close to that edge, but not too close where I'm going to widen the circle. Now that I have that plastic out, you can see the edging is still a little bit rough. So I'm going to have to go over to my hand files. I use metal ones for this, and open that up just a wee bit more. This way we could get our LED in here. And try to take your time and be careful with pieces like this. I actually went in there with some sandpaper to clean that up. And then I went back to my files just to make sure I was doing everything right. Because if I ruin this piece, there's a good chance I'd have to buy another model kit. Next up was opening up his eyes. And I'm using my Dremel again, but this is actually scarier than the chest. Because if I mess this up, this is going to be really hard to recreate. The circle would be a lot easier. So I know my hand's in the way, but I'm just popping a couple holes in here. And then I'm going to use the Dremel as a saw again and just go back and forth as gentle as I can to get rid of that plastic. Also, keep your drill bit clean of excess plastic because this could bind up and make the holes wider. Now that I have both eye slots open, I'm going to go to my flat metal file. I'm going to get in there and start filing everything down that I can. I'm also going to switch back and forth between this and my X-Acto knife to get rid of all that excess plastic. Now that I have the eyes and the hole on his chest cleaned up, we're going to take Tamiya extra thin cement. What we're going to do with this is we're going to put it in the eyes and around the circle in the chest, and that's going to melt that excess plastic down and give us a nice smooth finish. All I do is take a little bit, run it around a bead like this, and it'll melt it right down and it'll look really clean. And I use the same process for the circle, and you can see here that everything melted nicely. With every model kit, we have decisions to make. The sculpt on this isn't the greatest. How they have the robot in the rocks, it looks like the rocks are up between the joints where the ball is and his legs are, and it shouldn't be like that. His legs would have snapped off. So I had to make a decision if I'm going to scratch build this part or not, and I decided against it because the hand is going to be over it, and it's actually going to obscure that part enough where we don't have to do that, and we can move on to building more. I decided to experiment with this kit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put Scotch tape across the eyes and the chest, and we're going to use resin from my Anycubic printer, fill it in, and use a UV light to cure it, and hopefully that works out well. And I have the Scotch tape across his chest. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a cotton bud and I'm going to burnish it down. This way the resin doesn't leak through, and then we're going to put resin in here and cure it. Now that we have the Scotch tape on there, I'm just going to take a pipette with some clear Anycubic resin, and I'm going to slowly put it in here. I'm going to do one small layer, then I'm going to use the UV light, cure it, then we're going to do another layer, slowly building it up, and hopefully this comes out nice. Unfortunately, there is a bubble in here and kind of a divot. I think I'm going to take this out and try it again. I decided to do it again, but you can see here that it crazed, and actually the circle's getting bigger and bigger. So I think I'm going to have to go to a plan C with this. I've decided to go against using resin for the eyes. What I'm doing is the old milk jug method. We're going to take the milk jug, cut it into pieces, and use that as diffusion. This way we don't get too many hot spots with the LEDs. I'm just going to push it in here, and then we'll get it down with some super glue. Plan C for the chest was to create my own 3D part. I drew this up in Microsoft 3D Builder, and all I did was do a couple rings and a bulb, and I measured out the chest. This way I could fit that piece in there, and I glued it in. This way we have a new chest piece, which I think actually looks better than the other one. The eyes, you can see that the milk jug is in there, and those are going to be nicely diffused. We'll do a little lighting test for you. This is how it's going to look. I'm going to pull it back a little bit so we get a nice full effect on there. That looks much better than the tiny light that was in there before. And here's what the eyes are going to look like. Both pieces are going to have an effect. This way they're pulsing up and down like the Green Lantern is taking his power. Now that I have a mess with the super glue, I'm going to actually light block right now. We're going to use Tulip Slick. This is a very thick paint. It's actually meant for fabrics. We're going to put it around the sides to make sure no light leaks out of the eyes. You can brush this on, but it is a squeeze bottle and it's very thick, like I said, and it pretty much stays in place. So I'm just going to do a band around the bottom of the eyes, around the sides, and around the top. Finally, finishing off the sides, I'll put this to the side, and it takes the tulip about 4 hours to set up. Because of how deep the head is, I had to make something to hold the lights. I couldn't just put the LED lights in there. They wouldn't stay at the depth we needed. So I just took some styrene sheet, cut it down to size, and once we had the size we needed to fit over the head, I took my Dremel and I started poking holes in it. What I was doing this for is I'm going to take the LEDs and I'm going to strap them down with zip ties. This way they stay in place. I took the smallest zip ties I had and I just fished it through both holes. My first attempts weren't great. By the time I got to the fourth one, I was pretty much a pro at where to put these things. After I pull it through, I'll put it through the loop and then I'll pull it down slowly and get the LED in place. Now I'm just testing the plastic card to make sure it's in the spot I want it to be and the angle of the LED is good. And you can see it's lighting that eye up nicely. I'm actually going to put 3 more LEDs on here so it's nice and bright inside the eyes. And here's the card with all 4 LEDs hooked up. I did bend over the LEDs so they're on an angle, and I'm just going to put them inside the head. This way I can see what it looks like. All the eyes are lighting up very nicely. Let's shut the lights off a little bit here so we could get a better view in a lower light. Definitely what I'm looking for, a nice bright set of eyes. Now that we know the LEDs are working, it's time to set it in place. So I'm going to put the card in here. I'm going to use super glue, but I'm going to use a super glue gel because I don't want the super glue running down into the head and ruining anything that we had. So I'm just going to put it in place, hold it there, make sure I have the lights good, and then we're going to super glue it in place so it doesn't go anywhere on us. And here's a little trick while you're super gluing. If you're going to use an accelerator to make your super glue dry faster, you don't have to pump spray. Just open the bottle and use the end and drip some on there, and then it doesn't get all over the place on you. It's time to do the lighting for the chest. What I did was I took a piece of tube, I tie wrapped 3 LEDs together, and I shoved them in the tube. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it towards the back of the model kit. This way I can see the depth of those LEDs and if I'm getting the light that I want. The LEDs were sitting too close, so I'm just going to adjust these by pulling them back some, setting them a little further back because I want the whole chest plate to light up. Now that I have the light where I want them and it's a good shine through, all I'm going to do is take some of that gel super glue and I'm going to put it on the edge to hold them in place. This way they don't move on me. And I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. I'm going to take the accelerant, drip it onto the super glue. This way it'll hold it in place and I don't have a mess of liquid everywhere. Now that I have everything set up, it's time to mount the tube into the body of the model kit. So I'm just going to hold it in place. Again, we're going through the same steps over and over to get everything set up. We're just going to use that gel super glue and the accelerator and get this held in place. And we have a nice light. And I completely forgot to tell you, that beige ring around there, that's Milliput to make sure that everything was sealed in properly. Now it's time to work on the glowing hands and try to figure out how we're going to do the lighting. Underneath there are 3 pins. This is how the hand gets pushed in, and I won't even have to glue these in, which is nice. But what we're going to do is we're going to take green LEDs and we're going to put them in those 3 holes. And hopefully it's going to light up the hand. It was time to take out the razor saw and do some work. What I'm doing is I'm cutting the pegs off, which ended up being a little bit difficult. I'm not cutting them all the way down. I'm actually cutting them just to where they meet the edge of the lip underneath. This way I can use the green LEDs and try to shoot light through each one of the fingers. After you do cut the clear plastic, it is quite hazy. So I took out my sanding sticks and I'm going from a medium grit all the way down to a fine grit and then a buffing stick, and that will get them all clear again. It's time to work with LEDs again. You can see this is a round top. This isn't going to work to get the light as much as possible through that hand. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to grind the head down to a flat surface very carefully as close as we can to the diode. What we're going to do is we're going to use our Dremel on the lowest speed possible, and we're going to shave this LED down slowly and get it down as far as we can. Do not hit the diode or the LED is not going to work. Now that the surface is flat, we have to test it to make sure that we didn't hit anything while we were taking the Dremel to it, and the light is much brighter and works fine. After you shave down the LED, it is going to have a haze to it just like that other plastic. So what we're going to need to do is take our sanding sticks again, go from a medium all the way down to a fine and then a buffing stick, and you'll have the head of the LED crystal clear again and you'll get a nice bright light. I had to figure out a way again to hold the LEDs in place. What I did was I took a piece of styrene rod and I glued it across. The LEDs actually have to be bent over again, the leads to them. This way they can sit in the proper mounting position so the light goes up the hand. On the side I just used super glue again to hold that 3rd one in place, and everything should be shining through once I test it. And here we go, time to flip the switch, and we have light. In the daylight, of course, it's not going to look that good. You're not going to see the glow, but it is shining up through. We're going to say the bright lights on the tips is where the most energy is to hold the robot down. So let me lower the lights a bit. This way you can see it in a dimmer light. And here it is in a dimmer light, and you can see the glow a little bit better. It's not that good if you have this in a very lit room. You're not really going to see it. But now I'll shut off the lights, and I'll show you it in the dark. And you can see that the hand glows very nicely in the dark. And I'll put some stills in here too. This way you can get a better idea of how the hand is glowing. Now that we know that everything is good, the last thing I did was I took the tulip and I put it all around that pipe, and it's not to seal the light from going through anywhere. It's to seal that light in and get the brightest possible light we can in the chest. Now I'm back to the milliput. What I'm going to use this for is I'm going to seal off the sides of the plate that we made over here. The reason I'm doing that is because I don't want the red lights and the effect flowing into the green lights on the side. So I just took 2 even parts of the milliput, I squished them all together for a while, and then I just drape them over the sides, and you can use water to smooth them out and make sure everything is sealed off. The only place I'm really not going to do is the back of the plate where the wires are coming out. I'm not worried about that glow. It's mainly on the sides that I'm worried about. And that's it. She's all buttoned up and ready to go, so make sure you come for the next episode when we start working on the terrain.